Francis of the Filth, Chapter 6. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a bunch of guys caught under heavy debris are in a lot of trouble. All Frank was aware of upon waking up was the sound of sirens and the thick dust which clogged his nostrils. He was pressed down, trapped under a load of wreckage and flesh, and disturbed by a series of grunts and primal whines. He pushed several layers of plasterboard and broken pieces from him, removed Pink Guy's knee from his groin, and Salamander Man's recorder between his thighs, stood and dusted himself off.
"Where the hell are we?"
he said. His companions slowly rose from the ruins, complaining of aches and pains, surveyed their new landscapes. They could see little of it. Everywhere they looked was concrete. Concrete flooring, concrete walls, and concrete pylons. The only thing that wasn't concrete was the ceiling, which now had a gaping hole in it. It was dark. A lack of windows and a quiet air, still choking with the dust of an explosion, gave them little to see. Clearly, they were in the basement of some sort of building, but beyond that, they had no idea where they were or what lay around the corner. Sirens continued to blare periodically, and there was distant sound of bustle.
"Pink Guy,"
said Frank.
"do you have any idea where Chin Chin has sent us?"
Pink Guy replied with a demented groan.
"Yeah, I know, buddy. I'm feeling it too."
Frank's pink friend let out another painfully twisted cry, this time tinged with frustration.
"Pink Guy,"
said Frank.
"this is no time to be playing Lemon Man."
He began to shake him by the shoulders.
"I need you, buddy. Where are we? What's going on here?"
Pink Guy shrugged and repeated his sorry whining.
"Looks like those rocks might have hit you harder in the head than I thought,"
Frank said, more to himself than to the others.
"Salamander Man, you got it together?"
His froggy friend nodded in an impeded way, slowly placed his recorder deep into his left nostril, and began to play a slightly gloomy tune. It was clear to Frank that in this realm at least, he would be the leader of his clan.
"Come on,"
he said, and led the others across the cold, dusty floor to a staircase at the end of the building. They ascended a few flights before stepping out into bright sunshine. It took a while for their eyes to adjust to the brightness, but when they did, they were amazed at all the sights and sounds and activity of the place. It was buzzing with life, and this gave the three travelers a feeling of excitement and a sense of anxiety. Street after street, lined with apartment buildings and shopping complexes spread out in every direction around them. Yellow taxis, trucks, and other vehicles thundered up and down the streets, completely ignoring the emergency vehicles which rushed from time to time one way or another with their lights flashing and sirens wailing. And then there were the sidewalks, filled with mere mortals walking, pacing, jogging, sleeping, chatting, spitting, and kissing. They were white, yellow, green, blue, black. They were bald and fair and dreadlocks and curly, spiked and slicked and tied and shaved. They were obese and emaciated and fit and flabby, tall and short and crooked and straight. They interacted with each other in a myriad of languages, and they avoided each other in a most practiced manner. He had never seen such a bastion of individuality. Brimming with life, of sorts, it was as though every mere mortal or every walk and breath from every corner of the omniverse had gathered in one place.
"Where on the earth is this?"
Frank wondered aloud. After assessing the passing pedestrians for a while, Frank ventured to ask. A white middle-aged man dressed casually in an orange shirt and cream-colored pants walked toward him. He carried a small dog and a gentle demeanor, so Frank approached him.
"Excuse me, sir. I was wondering if you would be so kind as to tell me where I am."
"Fuck off, faggot,"
came the terse reply. The man never lifted his eyes from the pavement, brushed by Frank, and continued on his way. Frank was stunned by this violent exchange and wondered what on earth he had done to arouse the man's animosity. It was nothing, of course.
"I do believe,"
he declared to the others,
"that we are in New York."
Pink Guy muttered. Though still speaking absolute gibberish, he was somehow becoming comprehensible to Frank.
"Me too. I thought he was going to send us to Okinawa."
He thought about that for a while before adding,
"Blind suck."
Pink Guy grunted at him again, explaining to Frank that, technically, Chin Chin wasn't lying as Okinawa and New York were in the same realm. But the vast difference in landscapes led Pink Guy to question Frank's ability to navigate the place.
"Not really.
Frank replied.
It's a far cry from Okinawa, a different kind of jungle, but I think I can get us around. I mean, people are people, right? I'll be fine. I'll take it from here. Salamander Man, you'd better put your recorder away for now. We don't want to draw too much attention to ourselves."
With that, the Pink Guy, the Salamander Man, and Frank, with the filthy, never-washed blue shirt, made their way through the streets of New York. Frank determined that the first thing they needed to do was find accommodation, but being an academic genius, he had no idea how to go about it. Clearly, academic excellence in radiobiology would not necessarily translate into wisdom on the streets of this town. He decided to try his luck and just keep asking people. Surely, he reasoned, someone amongst all these people would be willing to point him in the right direction. He found a young, well-groomed man at a bus stop, seemingly with time on his hands. Frank approached him cautiously, yet gaily.
Excuse me, sir, my friends and I are looking for accommodation. Would you be able to let us know how to secure a premises in this realm?
No home?
The man dryly inquired.
No, we just arrived, you see, from another place.
Pink Guy and Salamander Man braced for recrimination.
You know why you don't have a home?
He said, rousing from his mellow posture. Frank just looked at him curiously.
Because I don't have a job.
Because there is no God, man. Yeah, you heard me. There is no God.
Frank continued to stare at the man, unsure where to take the conversation from this point.
What kind of God, man?
He started to yell.
Would create people and leave them without a home?
Clearly he was incensed by this.
All over the world, every day there are people starving and homeless and sick, man. Sick as a dog, and what does God do about it? Nothing. Nothing, man. And you know why?
Because Chin Chin really couldn't care less about mere mortals.
He wanted to say.
No.
He replied.
Because there is no God. There is no God, man. God is just a made-up character. A figment of people's imagination. The great boogeyman in the sky.
Okay, Mr. Atheist.
Frank responded, backing away.
I was just after some information, not a debate.
He turned to walk away.
How do you know for sure, anyway?
Because there is no God, man. There is no justice, no redemption. It's all mind control.
Just don't go up the mountain.
Frank called, almost out of ear range.
Say what?
Don't go up the mountain. Clearly a wounded soul.
Frank said, turning to his pink and green friends as they walked away.
Yes!
Salamander Man agreed. A young black woman screamed when she caught sight of them and ran to the other side of the road.
Wonder what she saw.
Frank mused. Pink Guy shrugged. The afternoon sun cast long shadows down the busy streets and withdrew its heat from the city sidewalks. Frank pondered who to approach next. A feather-haired madam with a tanned, leathery face carried a mouse-sized dog in her arms and crossed in front of them to greet a fruiterer as though he were a long-lost relative. Two men in tight black leather shorts paraded an arm across from them and stopped at a small window to consider buying coffee beans. A rotund Latino man with a very serious expression on his face and a pair of headphones clamped across his cranium power-walked right through them as though they had no right at all to be where he was walking. Looking dazed and confused, an old white man with a huge mustache and a hideous wig meandered nearby, wondering where to eat for dinner and whether he should run for president again this year. An enormous cockroach scurried across in front of them and disappeared down a drain. They all seemed at home here. After two misfires with males, Frank felt sure that he could procure a better response from the females of the city. He found one sitting on the steps of an old theater as though waiting for a friend to come or a homeless visitor to bowl up and ask questions. His confidence was high.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
He began.
Well, that was sure a lot better than the fuck you I got earlier.
He thought with a smile.
My friends and I are looking for accommodation and...
Oh, fuck you.
She said with a pained expression.
You men are all the same. What, did you think I was going to just invite you back to my place and have you stay? Where the fuck do you get off? I ought to put your balls in a sling. You sad, creepy little motherfucking pig molester.
I didn't want to go back to your place.
Frank tried to get out, but she would have nothing of it.
Just piss off, will you? You misogynistic little pissant before I call the cops.
Frank tried to reason.
I only wanted to ask you a question.
Oh yeah, that's how it always starts. You men are all the same. It starts with a question and it ends in some back alley with your hand up my crotch, while munching on a chicken tortilla and texting your mates.
She stabbed her hand into her bag and pulled out a small can of mace.
Now just back off.
She yelled, thrusting it towards him.
Back off, no means no.
Frank slowly stepped away as one would from an escaped lion.
Now hold on, I don't even find you attractive enough to sleep with. I mean, you're built like a Super Mario bullet. I'd never want to go home with you.
Her eyes widened with rage. His comrades were way ahead of him, already a block away and still running. He caught up with them eventually and thanked them for staying power.
This is going to be a lot harder than I thought.
He said, as though that would rally them.
Clearly the people here are not like the locals in Okinawa.
He reflected on that.
A perfect stranger would roll out a futon, give you a meal, a bath, and a good night rub down, I tell you.
Pink Guy looked aroused.
We might have to try a new strategy.
Yes!
Okay. What if we go where most of the people are and let them come to us?
Frank thought aloud. Salamander Man thought this was worth a try. Pink Guy thought it was the stupidest idea he'd ever heard, and across the realms and dimensions he'd heard many, but didn't have the heart to say so. They followed the lights and general flow of people heading downtown, continuing to observe all the sights and sounds and smells, which still remained utterly foreign to them. A young woman with short hair and facial piercings came up to them and greeted them.
Well, hello.
Frank said.
Are you guys locals or just visiting New York?
We're visitors who hope to become locals.
Frank explained. Pink Guy and Salamander Man were impressed with this answer.
Are you interested in supporting the war against factory farms and freeing all animals from slavery and suffering?
What?
For a moment there, Frank was unsure what language this lady was speaking.
We're encouraging people to change to a vegan diet for the sake of animal welfare and global sustainability.
Animal welfare?
Every year in the United States, 9 billion chickens are killed for human consumption. Doesn't that disturb you?
Well, not as much as eating them alive.
No, I'm being serious.
Me too. Have you ever eaten a chicken alive? I tried once in Okinawa. It didn't end well. Blood and feathers everywhere, and I almost got my eye pecked out. I'm all for killing them first.
What the fuck? What planet are you from, man?
She asked with utter disdain.
Do you really want to know?
Frank asked her.
No, I don't.
She said, and air pushed him away.
Does anyone in this place not have a rabid opinion about something?
Frank yelled to his friends and anyone else who might have been passing by.
Seriously, the Okinawan jungle on a bad day was better than this place.
They pressed on toward the thick sea of humanity ahead of them, passing a man at a counter whining incessantly that the price he was charged was $1.89 more than the advertised price, a hot dog vendor who was incapable of counting change correctly, a Wall Street banker in a tailored suit walking as though there was no one on the street but him, and a drug dealer passing his ware in a pizza box to his clients. To Frank and his boys, there was little difference between them all. In their passion for self and success, they had become one and the same. Rats, scurrying back and forth to create a world from which the ultimate prize was escape. They rounded a corner and stood before the largest man-made space they had ever seen. Enormous buildings stared down at them from the peripheries decorated with flashing lights and moving billboards. News reports ran across digital screens and music blared from all directions. Shops rimmed the ground floor of the area, selling everything from miniature statues of liberty to flesh-colored aliens that glow in the dark. And between it all was the most colorful parade of humanity that any of them had ever seen. Tourists, locals, hawkers, characters wearing costumes, characters wearing nothing at all, freaks and oddballs. It was hard to tell where one end of the spectrum ended and another started. The three walked into the middle of it all, bewildered, bemused, and besotted. Even in this neverland of individuality, it didn't take long for them to gain attention.
Excuse me?
Came a lady's voice.
My kids would like to have a photo with you.
She slipped a couple of dollars into Frank's hand, and two kids stood in front of them and smiled for the camera before any of them had any idea what was going on.
Hey man, me next.
It was a tall, dreadlocked man with a Rastafarian beret. He leaned on Frank, took a photo, then slipped a bill in his top pocket.
Thanks, man.
He said, departing. Immediately, a young woman stepped forward.
Me and my friend.
She said.
Well, sure.
Frank replied. He began to enjoy this.
No, not you.
She said matter-of-factly.
Just the pink one, just the pink one.
Pink Guy brushed Frank to the side and stepped forward with tremendous pride. The woman took their photos, paid Frank the money, and rushed off again. Next, it was Salamander Man, then Pink Guy again, then Salamander Man. Sometimes it was all three, but usually the other two. Frank didn't care. All he could see was the money coming in. Pink Guy and Salamander Man got into the spirit and began to work the money. Pink Guy would break into dance and spin and pose to the rapturous applause of onlookers before a short queue of photo takers would form again in front of him. Salamander Man was not to be outdone. He produced his recorder from nowhere, thrust it into nostril, and began to play a tune while dancing on the spot like a leprechaun. Within an hour, they had enough to buy themselves a fine meal for dinner. Frank recalled seeing a Japanese bar and bistro named Kyushu Cuisine on their way to the square.
It's not quite Okinawa,
He explained to his friends.
but I don't think we're going to get anything closer than Kyushu.
Retracing their steps, they found it easily, descended a dark staircase, and entered a world that was vaguely familiar to Frank. Adorned with rice paper screens that opened onto blank walls, rising sun flags, and posters of Japanese beer girls, it was a taste of Japan, sort of in the heart of New York City. They were greeted with the customary "Irashaimase," although to Frank it sounded more like "it's a shame to say." The place was full. True to New York, there were people every color, size, language, and odor gathered there. drinking and eating and having a merry time. At the end of the bar, holding an audience with tales of his homeland, was an odd-looking Japanese man wearing brown tortoiseshell glasses, a Hawaiian shirt, and a safari hat, speaking with bad breath in a voice that was aggravatingly loud. Frank and his friends took a seat nearby.
So I said to them, "Why don't you try some octopus balls?" And then they said, "We didn't even know that octopuses had balls." And I said, "They sure do, and let me tell you, my friend, they are enormous, the size of golf balls, and they come in packs of 6.
The small crowd around him were enthralled by his storytelling.
I once ate 24 in a row. I almost inked myself.
There was hearty laughing all around.
Now, as I'm sure my compatriot friend here will tell you,
He said, gesturing towards Frank.
there is no place on earth that produces more delicious octopus balls than the streets of southern Osaka. Right, my friend?
Okinawa actually has better takoyaki than Osaka.
The Japanese safari man laughed with a hint of embarrassment.
You must be a little confused, my friend. Okinawa has the Goya champuru. Osaka has octopus balls.
Have you tried Okinawa's takoyaki?
Suddenly there was silence around the bar. It was a showdown and a tension rippled across the bistro.
Osaka's are good and they have the name, but there is a stand just off the bench in Onasan in Okinawa. Their balls are equal to those of Osaka, but they top them off with green furikake and shaved fish that is second to none. I tell you, Safari Man, their takoyaki is superior.
There was an awkward silence before the safari man spoke again.
Looks like we'll all have to go to Okinawa then.
And the whole bistro returned to levity. The safari man took a seat at Frank's table and introduced himself.
Good to meet a fellow expat. My name's... Oh, just call me Safari Man. I like that better.
Frank.
Said Frank.
Pete Guy, Salamander Man.
He added, pointing to the others.
I know.
Said Safari Man. There was a suspicious silence for a moment. He leaned in.
I'm a rank and file too.
How did you recognize me?
Safari Man pointed to Pink Guy and Salamander Man.
What else could they be?
He belted out in an audible voice again. Pink Guy looked perturbed at the idea that he stood out so much.
What brings you to New York?
He asked again in a quieter voice.
Tintin.
Shh.
Safari Man pressed his hand hard against Frank's mouth.
Don't say the name. He knows this realm well. He could be listening.
They spoke in lowered tones for the rest of the evening at the end of the bar.
Are you on the run?
We were cast here by the Dark Lord. He found me in another realm. He knows what even I have only recently come to know. My chromosomes are multiplying. Oh, wow!
Safari Man jumped up at this, startled and excited.
It's you. There have been rumors, but no one knew if they were true. But they are. And it's you.
Salamander Man began to play a tune on his recorder.
Not now, Salamander Man.
He sullenly put it away.
The Dark Lord gave me a choice. Provide him with a lifetime supply of my chromosomes or spend eternity in the deepest, darkest abyss.
New York?
No, I gave him my chromosomes. I'm here so he can find me again when my chromosomes have increased. But I don't know how long that will take in this realm. In the meantime, I'm trapped here.
Safari Man leaned across the table and whispered in his ear.
Come and stay with me, you and your friends. There are ways, Franku. Ways to increase your chromosomes here. You can defy the Dark Lord and escape, Franku. Gain your freedom. There are ways that he doesn't know about. Come with me and I'll show you.
Frank turned to his friends.
What did I tell you? If you go where the people are, they will come to you.
Pink Guy grunted his annoyance. Their new friend lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in Brownsville, Brooklyn. He offered Frank a futon in his room, leaving the other two to sleep on the sofa or the floor. They all gratefully accepted. As Safari Man started passing around drinks, the real conversation began.
What year is this, Safari Man?
2017.
2017? That takoyaki stand in Onasan is surely gone now.
So I was right after all, Franku. It is Osaka with the best balls.
I hate this place.
Frank said.
I hate it with passion.
The sound of the gunshots could be heard outside in the distance.
I was born in a time when the Americans were destroying us, nuking the flesh off our bones, and after the surrender, terrorizing us and shooting the innocent.
Vivid memories of Sergeant Benson came to him and he began to sweat and tremble.
They were monsters. I hate all they were and all they stood for, and now, look around, Safari Man, it's only worse. Look what has become of them. They are an immoral people filled with poor discipline, rudeness, greed, gluttony, perverseness, stupidity, and pornography. And they're so angry.
I don't mind the porn, to be honest. It's, well, just a bit, you know. But you're right, Franku, a perverse people.
There were more gunshots followed by screaming, car tires screeching, and more gunfire.
This culture is so self-centered and self-righteous, it makes me sick. How can you stand it here?
There was silence between them for a while.
Of all the realms I've been to, Safari Man,
Frank said, dejected.
I think this one confuses me the most.
Pink Guy and Salamander Man were exhausted after their first day in New York, and soon fell asleep on the sofa to the sounds of police sirens, knife fights, and neighbors making wild love. Frank and Safari Man continued their conversation in the other room.
You said something about increasing my chromosomes?
Yours are already multiplying, Franku, but you can speed up the process. And the more you get, I'm betting the faster they multiply, it's exponential.
He leaned in as though to whisper a secret of cosmic repercussions.
You could outwit Chin Chin. Get out here before he comes back.
How, Safari Man?
His Hawaiian-shirted friend leaned back out.
You can win them,
he said, opening his arms wide. This was pronounced in a voice was way too loud, and Pink Guy and Salamander Man in their sleep in the next room as he said it. He looked so pleased to be revealing this to his new friend, one who he sensed was vastly superior to him even though they were on equal tiers.
Hi.
Illegal crawfish racing.
It was a common yet unexplainable phenomena that those who found themselves stranded in foreign dimensions were quickly drawn to one another. Whether this was a cosmic working beyond their means or a natural gravitation of the like-minded was unclear, but small gatherings of them would assemble and with little or no hope of escape, bet chromosomes. The mechanisms for such betting were almost endless, yet for some reason illegal crawfish racing just happened to be Safari Man's favorite kind. Frank's response took Safari Man by surprise.
Why is crawfish racing illegal?
Oh, Franco, it's not the racing itself, it's the betting. Only we won't only be betting for money, that's just the cover. We'll be betting for chromosomes, and the idiot mortals won't even know what we're doing.
He was delighted with this toying with the cosmos' sort of way. It was like a kid at the electric company finding a screwdriver in Daddy's toolbox, sticking it into a fuse box, and bringing the whole grid to a halt.
Leave it to me, Franco. I'll bring in the shady characters, you just wait here. We'll have you bursting with chromosomes in no time.
Frank woke in the morning after a night of deep throat snoring and heavy salivation. Safari Man was nowhere to be found. Pink Guy and Salamander Man were squatting on the sofa, squealing and grunting and yesing. They were spinning a tangerine on the floor. Frank was left to wonder if he'd woken up in a sheltered workshop. Without so much looking in a mirror, Frank left the apartment and began to walk the streets of this metropolis. He felt different doing it, edgier, angrier, filthier. It was as though the very ether of this place was infecting him, polluting his DNA and retarding his mind. There was something weird about this city. As he walked by a vomiting woman, stepped over an addict, and under a statue of Roosevelt heralding the wonders of the free world, he sensed that this might not actually be the real New York. It felt as though it was more like a fabricated, alternate version of the real thing. Yet, his own senses were being so frustrated he could no longer be sure of what he was thinking or feeling. He turned into a large park, hoping that nature would restore some peace to his mind, if not bring full rejuvenation. He was disappointed. The grass, shrubs, and trees gently bent and bowed in the breezes that blew across the ponds. The birds sang to each other in rounds, and the squirrels playfully quarreled over nuts and berries before returning to their drays and resting from their escapades. But all that life, teeming and tumbling and leaping and laughing, seemed to be overcome by something else, quenched by a great melancholy, tormented by a ringing anxiety. He headed back to the apartment, not only without the cheer or carefreeness that eluded him when he left, but now completely without hope as well. He barked at his friends upon entering, and they scrambled out of the way. Safari Man had still not returned, so Frank entered the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the bed, and clutched his head in a deep despair.
This isn't the Earth I wished for,
he muttered. He stood and paced the room before sitting again. This routine went on for hours. He began talking to the wall, gesturing toward it as he did so, and occasionally screaming. He was going out of his mind. Pink Guy and Salamander Man, too scared to intervene, remained curled up on the sofa in fetal position, waiting for Safari Man to return and offer help. In a moment of lucidity, Frank grabbed a video camera from one of Safari Man's drawers, sat it on a tripod, and began to record his ramblings. He thought he was dying, brain cancer he suspected, and had to document his deterioration. Little of it made sense. Most of it was incoherent filth, yet provided him with a means of self-analysis and escape.
Oh, wow, Frank!
Called Safari Man, swinging the front door wide open. He was taken aback to see the other two curled up and sucking their thumbs. Pink Guy pointed toward the bedroom in the same freewheeling fashion.
Oh, Frank!
He took one look into Frank's bloodshot eyes and said only one thing would come into his mind. Frank turned and looked at him with a surly expression. Safari Man was not to be deterred.
Wow, Frank!
He continued in his excitable tone.
You look like you've just gone 10 rounds with one of those midgets on roids.
He spoke in Japanese, but Frank had no trouble understanding him.
I think you need a drink, Franku.
With a stiff drink and Safari Man's ineffable good cheer, Frank returned to a less disturbed state and invited Pink Guy and Salamander Man to join him and Safari Man for dinner.
It's set.
Safari Man announced 30 minutes later while wiping his greasy mouth with the back of his hand. The three newcomers all looked at him.
The illegal crawfish racing event. Ha ha ha, it's all set, it's good to go, it's ready and steady. Next Saturday in the park. Ha 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 ha, it'll be great.
How do you know that? Who's coming that will make this event so great?
I've got a few old friends lined up.
Do tell.
Well, two of them are amongst the city's finest black gentlemen.
When were they released?
Just yesterday.
Excellent. What were they in for?
One was in for assault. It was no big deal. He survived, but ha ha ha, he's a tough cookie. He went 15 rounds in the ring with Mike Tyson.
That is impressive.
Unfortunately, it was during training and he was unconscious for 14 of the rounds.
You're kidding me?
Tyson simply used him as a punching bag. But hey, Papa Franco, he was still in the ring with Tyson for 14 rounds.
Fair enough. Who's the other?
A lowlife who makes the other lowlifes look like shining arcs of kindness and charity.
What's his specialty?
He was arrested for molesting dead elephant seal, but was released on technicality. The elephant seal was not dead yet, and was rearrested for stage diving at a nun's funeral.
I like him already.
But otherwise a really nice guy. As I said, he's only just been released. He's up for anything.
Excellent. Who else?
An old Latino friend of mine, always good for a flutter over chromosomes.
When was he released?
He's never been caught.
Sounds like a smart cookie.
Wouldn't know if his head was being seared with an iron. He once broke his leg in half purely to see if he could set it again by himself. He now walks with a permanent limp. Easy pickings.
Perfect. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Of course, my friend, of course. This next guy is a legend. You're gonna love him. Just love him. All 3'2" of him.
What?
He's a leprechaun. Alpha Centurion. Escaped from the circus just last Wednesday. Not a clue when it comes to gambling chromosomes. Not a clue, ha ha ha. Ripe for the picking, my friend.
Do we want the chromosomes of a leprechaun?
They work. And they're better than the chromosomes of a vegan.
Good point. I must say, Safari Man, you've done a stellar job.
Not done yet, Papa Franco. I have also arranged for Drone to come.
Let me guess. Drone is the product of an incestuous relationship that has spent the last 15 years roaming the wilderness and howling at the moon?
Not quite. Drone is a drone, a flying camera.
How are we supposed to get chromosomes from a flying voyeur cam?
We don't, but it comes in useful for controlling those who do have chromosomes.
Frank enjoyed hearing of the fruits of Safari Man's labors, but remained unconvinced that the event would produce anything of real value.
Safari Man, I just don't see how this is going to work. How can we even be sure of winning, let alone obtaining any chromosomes from the losers? And I do mean losers.
Franco, it's set, it's rigged, our crawfish can't lose.
How can you be sure of that?
Because our crawfish are actually mice disguised as crawfish. Brilliant, huh?
I like your style, Safari Man.
Frank was starting to really enjoy this camaraderie.
But I just can't see how we're going to get any chromosomes from a bunch of misfits like that. I mean, why would humans be gambling for chromosomes at all?
Ah, my friend,
Said Safari Man, rubbing his hands together.
these guys are not, you see, actually human.
They're not.
Of course not. They're humanoid. They're tiered as mere mortals, but they are not actually human. They're something entirely different. And what makes them such easy pickings is their desperation to become rank and files. They'll literally gamble their souls away trying to jump tiers, but most of them actually have the intellect of beasts and the morals of sewer rats. They're nothing. Take my word for it, Franco. You will score at least 2 million chromosomes from this event alone.
Are you serious? 2 million chromosomes?
I guarantee it.
How do you guarantee the procuring of chromosomes?
Papa Franco, I bet you my apartment that you will win over 2 million chromosomes from illegal crawfish racing. That's how sure I am.
There was little more for Frank to do than agree.
Bonder.
But there is a small catch, Franco.
Oh, I knew it.
Lord Chin Chin will no doubt have his minions keeping an eye on you. Once he finds out you're involved in illegal crawfish racing, it's all over.
So what's the point of all of this then?
Papa Franco, it means you go in disguise.
Frank loved this idea.
Yes, I could dress up as a flute-playing, folk-dancing goblin, or maybe an obese, bearded lady with hemorrhoids. Or how about one of those cute, large-breasted, mini-skirted, boggle-eyed girls in Japanese anime?
He was getting really excited as he said this. Safari Man, Pink Guy, and Salamander Man looked at him with a hint of disgust.
What happened to you?
Asked Pink Guy. Safari Man broke the moment of tension.
I was thinking you could wear a World War I flying cap, some weird sunglasses, and a happy coat and call yourself Kamikaze Failure Frank. Chin Chin and his minions will be after someone who looks intelligent. It's the perfect disguise.
This was met with boisterous laughter, backslapping, and the raucous passing of wind. They celebrated Safari Man's plan until late into the evening, singing and dancing and passing out from excessive alcohol consumption. That Saturday evening, they returned to the apartment in ragged excitement. The plan, though without its oversights, had gone splendidly. Each of the characters had turned up and on time, except for Alpha Centurion, who always liked to make the last entrance. The betting was fierce and the stakes grew high. While Frank was not able to fool all of the entrants with his micey crawfish, by the time they realized it was too late and he had absconded with all money. Yet not all had gone to plan. While Frank raked in all money, Alpha Centurion, crafty little fellow that he is, stole all the chromosomes and set off across the park at full speed. Fortunately, Alpha Centurion at full speed is no faster than a sea cucumber on dry land, and Frank was armed with Drone, who rounded him up in no time. Frank cut a deal with Alpha. He would swap all the monetary takings of the day for all the chromosomes that Alpha had taken during the illegal crawfish racing event. The runt, having lost his job with the banning of dwarf throwing, was in agreement, and the swap was made. Alpha Centurion provided Frank with all the chromosomes, allowing him to keep 1,000 as a goodwill gesture, and Frank, having quickly learned the ethics of this town, handed over half the money taken that day. His little friend had no idea and was wholly pleased with the outcome. He was so pleased, in fact, that he followed Frank back to his apartment and joined in their evening festivities. Their little friend endeared himself to them so much, in fact, that they allowed him to stay and join their growing posse of unlikely rank and files. The fact that Alpha Centurion had nowhere else to stay was lost on them, possible due to the excessive alcohol that they had consumed.
There is one more matter to be settled before we retire for the evening,
Frank said with a flushed face. He turned to Safari Man. Safari Man replied in the only way he knew how. Only this chortle was noticeably less jovial than those he had previously released.
You bet, Safari Man, that I would make at least 2 million chromosomes from the illegal crawfish racing.
Safari Man looked decidedly uncomfortable.
Unfortunately, I was only able to get 1,999,000 chromosomes. A solid amount, but clearly not the required amount.
He looked at Safari Man with a wholly unconvincing look of sorrow.
I'm afraid I will have to take the keys to your apartment.
But Frank, cried Alpha Centurion, you gave...
Shut up, you little butt plug! I gave you your fair share of the money. Are you one of those people who comes back for more after a deal is made?
Alpha Centurion, despite being a consummate potty, Mouth himself, was not used to being scolded like that. He waddled over to the cupboard, climbed in and closed the door. Safari Man morbidly handed over the keys of his apartment to Frank, who received them graciously. They were now his.
Safari Man,
said Frank.
I like you. You're like a brother to me.
He turned to all of them.
You're all like brothers to me. We are family. The keys to this apartment are mine, but the apartment is for all of us. We will share it equally and fairly until I tell you to get the fuck out. What do you say?
Enormously buoyed by these words, they all came in for a group hug. Even Alpha Centurion fell out of the cupboard and came over to join them. They sang and danced and picked the lint from their navels until deep in the night.